ask the Infrastructure Minister to make a statement on the traffic issues at Governor's Bridge, Victoria Road and St Ninian's Junction, the closure of Summerhill, Broadway and Church Road, Marina Junctions and the impact on road users.
Call on the Minister for Infrastructure, Honourable Member for Ayr and Michael. Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am somewhat surprised that the member for Onken has asked this question, having been a member of the department when these issues were discussed in detail. I took the decision to relax the constraints on the contractor building the Douglas Promenade to help ensure that there will be as little disruption to the 2021 summer tourist season as possible. The tourist industry for this year has been lost, and we must give the businesses on the promenade all the support we can for the 2021 season. This means that we, the travelling public, will have additional disruption to our normal travel routines. I have made a decision that's in the island's best long-term interests in exceptionally difficult circumstances. The member for Onken may feel that the short-term needs of her constituents are more important than the economic well-being of the island. I cannot share this view. This is a scheme of national importance. Temporary changes have been implemented to ease the increased flow of traffic through Douglas as a result of the promenade being closed to southbound traffic. It was inevitable that this extra traffic would cause longer queues and increased travel time during peak travel hours. As members know, to mitigate any potential issues, the road layout on the main road in Onken, Governor's Bridge and the St Ninian's Junction were changed, and the timings of traffic lights adjusted to support these changes. Had we not done this, I am sure that the problems would have been far worse. The bus and cycle lane at the St Ninian's Junction was created to help commuters travelling by bus move past some of the inevitable traffic queues. Please remember that a full bus could take more than 70 cars off the road, so it is right to prioritise buses over vehicles. We are also trying to encourage cycling, so allowing cyclists to use this lane was also a priority. Allowing all traffic to use the additional lane at St Ninian's was considered. However, the consequences of this will be significantly longer queues at the next bottleneck, the Rosemount Junction, the use of residential streets in and around that part of Douglas as a shortcut, and buses being unable to maintain their schedule. The inevitable traffic queuing is better managed on a largely non-residential section of road. Both junctions were changed in the light of experience shortly after the temporary layouts were installed, in line with our planned approach. The department continues to monitor the situation at both junctions, and further changes will be made if they are needed. Members will, of course, know that the changes to these junctions are temporary. As the Honourable Member will recall, I recently hosted a meeting of Douglas and Onken members of the House of Keys to talk about traffic issues in their constituencies. There were some positive and helpful suggestions, and I am looking at a number of those. I am very pleased, however, to announce today that the suggestion made at that meeting by the other member for Onken, and also now the new member of my department, Mr Rob Collister, MHK, is being taken forwards. The department will be issuing free bus travel cards to those residents of Onken, Baldrine and Laxey who want them. These cards will be loaded with 18 journeys so that anyone in those areas who wants to commute by bus can do so. The tickets will be for use in peak hours. If residents of these areas want to use one free journey a day, they can in effect commute for half price for almost a month, and will of course have the ability to potentially become regular bus users. A press release giving more details will be issued soon. Turning to the second part of the question, completion of the promenade without the closure of Broadway, Church Road, Marina and Summerhill at this time would have delayed the project by several months, which would in turn have increased the ongoing traffic disruption for everybody, including the businesses on the prom. The biggest concern for me is that the projected finishing date of the scheme would, in that case, have been just before TT 2021. I've made it clear that I want the work to be done before the 2021 visitor season, because I do not think it right that we impact on the visitor economy in its first year after coronavirus. I cannot countenance the risk of having TT visitors arriving to find cones on the prom and hotels fenced off. When we decided to press on with the scheme and to get it done whilst the visitor economy was out of action, we knew there would be impacts on businesses, residents and road users. That is, I suspect, something that we will return to when we debate the report to the Scrutiny Committee later this sitting. So for now, I will leave it at that. Thank you, Mr President.
Can I ask all honourable members to check their electronic devices are on silent? Please. Supplementary question, Ms Edge.
Thank you, Mr President. It's quite surprising, really, the tone of a new minister's in the House today. I think totally inappropriate However, complete lack of consultation with the people of the island. The question I'd like to ask the Minister is, he's obviously very pleased with himself to announce about buses following the meeting with Douglas and Onken MHKs where various suggestions came forward, but I'm also aware that officers of the department had suggested that some time ago, so why wasn't it appropriate at that point in time to implement that? I'd also like to ask the Minister today with regards to the impact on all other businesses on the island from these road closures. It's not just about businesses on the promenade and the TT next year, which seems to be his focus. It's about the other businesses, the taxi business. Can the Minister advise what consideration he has taken with regards to a member of the public travelling from Onken into Douglas that used to possibly be a £7 fare, it's now a £14, £15 fare. Is that helping anybody on this island, Minister? And also with regards to parking, you mentioned that it's causing problems in other areas of the island in the smaller streets of Douglas. Can the Minister confirm he does have parking controllers on the streets at this present time? Thank you, Mr. President.
Minister to reply.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Quite a number of questions in there amongst some comment, which I'm not going to respond to the comment because I think it would lower the tone further from this question.
From you, Minister.
What I would say, Mr. President, is that the people of the Isle of Man, their best interests, whether they be taxi drivers, whether they be businesses, whether they be residents, whether even they be visitors to this island, is to get this job done. That's the clear mandate. That's what's been agreed with as a government approach to this. We're putting every effort into delivering that. There's a huge amount of work going on by the contractor, by the department staff, by lots and lots of people to actually deliver this scheme. That is the requirement. It is painful. It was always going to be painful. Anybody who thought otherwise, frankly, wasn't living in the real world. We can all sit here, we can all criticise, we can all poke. The reality is, my predecessor as Minister of Infrastructure took the brave and bold decision to end 10 years of talk and to get on with fixing the prom, which was one of the most overriding issues back in 2016, particularly on the doorsteps in Douglas. So, we've started the job. We've got to finish the job. It was never going to be easy. We need to press on. We need to stay focused on the job in hand, and that is what we're doing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Now, I have quite a number of supplementary questions. If I could ask that they be kept precise. Honourable Member Mr Henderson.
I accept that this is in the national interest. I've got no problem with that and applaud the department for pressing on with the prom scheme. However, addressing the question and to ease the pain and make it less painful, would the Minister agree with me that it would be very useful for he or his senior officer to do on-site assessments at Governor's Bridge and at the bus lane approaching St Ninian's, Governor's Bridge traffic? Many drivers, this is personal experience, do not recognise what's happening there, and there's multiple near misses with cars exiting Governor's Bridge dip towards Onken. Traffic from the mountain road coming onto that roundabout do not realise they need to give way, and there's what we call near miss T-bone incidences, which could be very serious. The signage, the line markings, something needs to change there to make that safer. Bus lane, would you agree with me? Take it off for the time being and trial it for 2 or 3 weeks with no bus lane. Currently, the issue is drivers dodging out of the middle lane into that. Again, very dangerous.
Reply, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Well, clearly, motorists are responsible for their own standard of driving, and anybody who doesn't drive with due consideration is not operating properly on the highway. However, the Honourable Member for Council does make a very fair point around the Governor's Bridge junction, and I drive through that pretty much every morning, and I also drive through the St Ninian's junction and turn left down by St Ninian's School. I recognise the concerns about the Governor's Bridge, and particularly the cars emerging northbound out of Governor's Dip. I've asked officers, the Director of Highways, to review that situation and to consider what can be done to mitigate that issue. I mean, clearly, it is a temporary arrangement. It has been modified on at least 2, if not 3 occasions since it was put in line with the adaptive management approach. But there's always room for improvement. So that is absolutely a live issue, and it has been looked at at the current time. In terms of St Ninian's, I think what we need to do is we need to continue to monitor, and I did say in my answer there that this is kept under continuous review. Whether taking off the bus lane is helpful or unhelpful is a judgment, but what I certainly wouldn't advocate is taking it off at the same time as the school's stopping at the end of this week, because you'll never know what had the effect then. So we'll keep it under review. I recognise the suggestions and the concerns, and I will take those back. And I would, in referring back to the meeting with Douglas and Onken members, it was really helpful to have that forum, to have that two-way exchange of views, and that is something that we're intending to continue on with on an ongoing basis, and there is a date in the diary for, I think, the 5th of August from memory. Thank you, Mr. President.
Honourable Member Mr Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr. President. With regard to the announcement on buses, when was this decision made? It is very area specific and creates a very powerful precedent. It also looks incredibly political. What are the projected costs of this, including the loss of revenue? Also, will those people who've bought annual cards and prepaid cards earlier be reimbursed for that? Thank you.
Minister to reply.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The decision was raised, as I said earlier, in the meeting, which was a couple of weeks or so ago. It was evaluated because clearly we need to consider the implications of all the suggestions, and I've got to say there were 7 or 8 positive suggestions made by the members of that group, and they're all being considered and evaluated. On this particular one, the decision was made finally a few days ago, in order to clearly be seen to be listening to the issue. You know, the issue that's being articulated is that there are traffic issues in Onken. One of the sensible things that we can do is try and get more people on buses. Clearly we want people to travel in an active manner, travel using public transport and take vehicles off the road. So this is something that the department can do and can implement. It's about making a pragmatic decision in terms of what's best for the island. I think it's a relatively low risk decision. We've quantified how many journeys are going to be free, and the hope is that we get a positive payback because we have an excellent bus service. It's up to every 15 minutes in certain areas of the island. It's well used in many areas. It's taken a hit through the COVID period. We want to get people travelling back on buses. That very much supports the climate change agenda, and this is an opportunity to respond both to the issues of traffic around the route in from Laxey and particularly Onken down into Douglas, and to try something and to evaluate it and see how it works. Thank you, Mr. President.
The list of supplementary questions is growing. Could questions and answers be kept as short as possible? Mr. Hooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I'd actually like to welcome that announcement of the subsidised bus travel for residents. I think encouraging people onto public transport makes sense if you're trying to remove cars off the road. One of the questions I would have for the Minister, though, is there are a lot of people actually who live in the north of the island who regularly travel to Douglas by car, and I would have thought that actually encouraging them onto the buses to take their cars off the road would also have been a sensible measure, especially on that number 3 bus route. So my question to the Minister is, given that there is a substantial population of people in the north of the island, in my constituency, for example, who might benefit from such a scheme, will he consider extending his proposal up the rest of the eastern coastline to make sure that actually everyone has the opportunity to get out of their car onto public transport and help try and resolve this traffic problem?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think the Honourable Member for Ramsey makes an excellent suggestion, which I'm happy to look at once we've got some learnings from the Douglas and from the Onken and Laxey experience. I would point out to the Honourable Member that the service from Ramsey doesn't just come down the coast road, which is where the big traffic issue is, coming down through Onken into Douglas, but actually there's an excellent service, the Express 3, over the mountain at peak times to service commuter demand, and in fact the number of return journeys per day has just gone from 2 to 3, with an extra one put on in the morning and a return in the evening, reflecting the growth in use of that excellent service, which is almost as quick as travelling by car. So I would commend the point that's made, and we'll keep it under review. Thank you.
Honourable Member Mrs Lord Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sort of the flip side to the question from Mr. Morehouse, actually, and it's to do with who had input to the route along Glen Crutchley Road being a cycle lane, because I'm conscious that it's not in line with the active travel investment plan, and that was announced in May last year. The intention was to have an off-road route, so I just wondered where that input had come. Is it more about the buses than the bikes? Why is it not in line with the active travel investment plan? And on the buses, when will some of the other timetables be looked at? Because people are talking about the buses in some parts of the island, in the west, for example. If you want to get a bus after you've dropped a child to school, you might get into Douglas around lunchtime. So the buses, you know, they're not all that great, you know. So thank you, Mr. President.
Reply, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. It does feel as though the scope of this question is somewhat expanding. I'm not sure that that it's appropriate for me to, given your advice about keeping the answer short, to be exploring the bus service from the west.
Replies to answers. Yes, thank you.
To answer the relevant part of the question, this is separate from the active travel investment plan. This was a pragmatic decision made in direct response to the requirement to get the prom done and the decision to make the prom one way. It doesn't substitute any commitments that have been made under the active travel investment plan. It was about trying to mitigate the effects of the 10,000 southbound journeys that are displaced every day from the prom onto the rest of Douglas, and it was put in. It's pragmatic, it's temporary, we're doing it, we'll learn from it, but the commitment to the active travel direction of travel is still absolutely there and unaffected by this.
Honourable Member for Douglas Central, Mr Thomas.
Thank you, Mr President. The Minister used the word national importance. Does he mean by that merely that it was an action in the programme for government, or does it have legal or financial implications for road traffic and transport, for planning, for critical infrastructure under the COVID regulations? I think it's important to clarify that for the public record. And secondly, given the Minister has a firm belief of the national interest and he's introduced blatant pork barrel politics into all of this, would you like to comment on whether he has introduced pork barrel politics?
Minister to reply.
Thank you. In the brief response to Mr Thomas's question, the answer is if something's in the national importance, it's important to the nation. And secondly, pork barrel politics, no.
Honourable Member for Garth, Mrs Kane.
Thank you, Mr President. I'll keep it brief because the Minister's already clarified that he's going to review the situation at Governor's Dip. But would he also consider, if not removing the bus lane, extending the filter lane aspect from St Ninian's, because the biggest piece of blockage there seems to be that nobody could legitimately go into the turning left lane because the white solid line extends too far, so you're actually waiting several turns of traffic lights before you can get through. So if not removing it, would he consider extending the filter lane? And the second question, again, just the clarification on who is going to be able to obtain free bus travel at commuter times on the number 3 route. He mentioned Onken, Baldrine and Laxey, but of course if you're in Maccled, wouldn't it extend to there and anybody on the number 3 if they got it from Ramsey? Otherwise, is he expecting people to drive to Laxey and do a park and ride just to be able to access free bus travel? Thank you, Mr. President.
Throw in Port Erin for good measure too.
Why, sir?
Thank you very much. Take on board the Honourable Member for Garth's comments about the filter lane. I would point out that the filter lane has already been extended once since it was originally put in, so it is now quite significantly longer than it was originally. But I'm happy to talk at that again. As I said, we keep things under review. In terms of Maccled, unfortunately, Maccled is not in Onken, Baldrine and Laxey, but in line with the spirit of the comments and the response made by the Honourable Member for Ramsey, we will look at that as well.
Honourable Member for Onken, Mr. Callister.
And thank you, Mr. President. Can I just first say that I fully support some of the comments from my colleague in Council, Mr. Henderson. I think he made some very valid points, and I share many of those because I actually raised them, I think, myself as well during that political meeting. The one thing, Mr. President, that I cannot believe is that these road closures that are in this question were not discussed at a political level in the department by the previous Minister, Mr. Harmer, and his political team, which includes Ms Edge and Ms Morehouse. Therefore, can I ask the Minister if these traffic issues were discussed in the department, and if so, can he provide some details? Because I think some clarity is needed for the public here. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank the Honourable Member for Onken for his question, and I can confirm that at the department meeting on the 1st of June, at which all political members of the department at that time were present, the closure of Summerhill was discussed, the Director of Highways was present, and the potential for traffic disruption was discussed. In addition, there was an extensive communication programme which was issued later on that week with a combination of a press release, a residents and business mail drop, various promenade newsletters, confirmation on MyProm website and MyProm social media. There was an article in the Isle of Man newspapers on the 5th of June. There was a 2,500 leaflet infographic, of which that's part of it, which was delivered actually by Isle of Man Post Office to all residents and business on Douglas Promenade on the 5th of June, and that explicitly set out the closure dates from the 25th of May through to the planned completion in 2021, and that explicitly showed the Summerhill closure dates as well as those for Broadway and the other key junctions. This has been regularly updated and reminded through the Promenade newsletter and on the website, and a reminder press release was issued on the 8th of July ahead of Summerhill closing on the 15th. So I think it was pretty well communicated, and I certainly believe it has been dealt with properly within the department. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Douglas East, Mr. Robert Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll go gently on the Minister, because I think his heart is absolutely in the right place on this one. Unfortunately, he has two separate issues, and within the department I would ask him to reflect on the way these two issues are getting conflated. There is a tremendous task to get the promenade open by next March. There is a will right through this House to see active travel move forward. Does he not find it very unfortunate that in a very, very tense and difficult position we've now conflated the two, and one particular member, who I won't name, who feels passionately about active travel, has suggested to me that this situation is in danger of creating a tribal approach. It's very unnerving to hear another member this morning say effectively that we're going to force drivers out into the buses. I think this sort of mindset needs to stop, and we need to step back from this. We need to pursue active travel, but we also need to be aware that drivers have rights and they cannot be second-class citizens, and taxi drivers cannot be third- and fourth-class citizens. Would he please reflect on all of this?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I find myself agreeing with much of what Mr. Robert Shaw is saying there. We have got a tremendous task to complete the prom, and we're going to do that, and that's the very clear mantra. The contractor understands that, all the team that are involved in it understand that, council ministers understands that, and everybody understands it's difficult and it's challenging and it's not going to be easy, but the pain will be worth the gain at the end of it, and the end product will be great. And there are many things going on. That's one of the beauties of the Department of Infrastructure. There are lots of things going on in there, and the prom polarises people's opinions, because everybody wants it, but nobody wants to take the pain of going through it. And it is having a significant impact on residents and on businesses and on commuters. There's no getting away from that. Active travel, there is a range of views on active travel. And what I want to bring is a sense of balance and a sense of proportion. Mr. Robert Shaw is absolutely right. There are some journeys that can only reasonably be done by car. Equally, there are many journeys that should be done using alternative methods, whether that be walking, whether it be cycling, whether it be using public transport. Where we need to end up with all this is very much a holistic approach to travelling around the island, but particularly travelling around Douglas. And I'm very hopeful that the work that's going on in the department around some of these policy areas, around how we do move around, the more integrated approach with car parking in Douglas, following the department's negotiations with Douglas Borough Council to bring car parks, two particular car parks, back into the department's ownership. That will allow us to have a more integrated approach and to provide solutions that work for everybody. So for me, it's about balance and it's about proportionality. But we do need to recognise as a community that if we simply do all the things that we've been doing historically in the way we've been doing them, we've got no chance of addressing the challenges that are ahead of us, whether that's the issues of the climate, whether that's the issues of obesity and lack of exercise affecting the health agenda. These things all come together, and we need to find ways through this by working collaboratively, but in a very focused way. And I would agree that taking tribal positions doesn't help. And I would point out that many people who cycle or walk also drive. Many people who drive cars also have children at school. Everybody's interests are all about making this island a better place to live and work. And we need to get through all this. We need to take some of the emotion out of it, get the prom done, continue to embrace some of these subjects which will run long after this administration. I mean, there's, even just on the order paper for today and tomorrow, there are issues around speed limits, for example, which are not going to be quick fixes and easy decisions to make. We need to take people with us on these things, and we need to get a Manx solution for the Isle of Man. Thank you, Mr. President.
Now, I want to bring the line of questions and answer closer to what was on the actual question that was ordered. It was quite specific about particular areas. Mr. Morehouse, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Could I say one sentence with regard to the previous question? With regard to the meeting on the 1st of June, that was mentioned in passing, and I, for one, certainly raised subsequent issues about it. Returning to the question, the original answer that made reference to no original data, the only data that was made reference to was the subsequent data collected. In terms of the road layout, the road changes, what data was used and when was that data collected? Thank you.
Minister.
Mr. President, I don't quite understand where the honourable members going here. We've got a professional team of highways engineers whose job it is to look at highway situations and make decisions. We made some decisions to change road arrangements around key junctions, which we've talked through. I'm not going to go and repeat, but we all know where they are. They were there as mitigation measures to ease the traffic which had been displaced from the prom. The department has continued to review, in the light of experience, how things have gone, and has made a number of changes around Governor's Bridge and around St Ninians, and will continue to do so, as I've already indicated. It's that real life experience of what's happening that has to be reacted to, and that is what we're doing. I mean, one of the other changes that we put in light of feedback from businesses was around the ability for traffic to return southbound down the return lane on the prom. That came directly from feedbacks to the department from businesses through Carl Miller, whose job it is to be the voice of the customer in this project, who fed it back into the department and said, you need to do something about this. That decision was made on a Friday morning, a week last Friday. Sorry, the issue was raised a week last Friday. The solution was identified the Friday afternoon. It was implemented largely on the Wednesday and would have been complete on the Wednesday if it hadn't been raining. It was a Thursday morning because you can't apply the white lines unless the road conditions are suitable. Within that, we also took the opportunity to put in 3 disabled parking spaces to ease the conditions of residents with particular situations, and a loading bay. We've got an established process for businesses to communicate through Carl Miller to raise their concerns, and we will listen and we will act where we can do so without compromising the overall goal, which is to get the project done by the end of March next year. Thank you.
Now, I have 4 more supplementary questions, and I'll give Miss Edge the final one if she wishes, and then we must move on. We've been nearly half an hour on this question. Mr. Harmer.
Thank you, Mr. President. And would the Minister agree with me in congratulating the Department and a sentiment of the whole of this court that there is to get this done? That I don't think there's any disagreement that this needs to get done and it needs to happen by next 31st. We also agree with me that actually the timing has been considered in depth, that it's in the holiday season, that traffic levels are still lower than they were in before COVID. And thirdly, would he also agree with me as there's a limitation in the way that we deal with the area plan and how much capacity there actually is on the road network, and how we need to be realistic and actually bold with some of our choices in promoting the increasing use of bus and giving choices for people to walk and cycle. Thank you.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would certainly agree with Mr. Harmer about the clear will to get this done by the 31st of March, and he's absolutely right. The timing of this is intentional. This is during the school holidays when traffic should be lower. It's over the summer season, which has been decimated by COVID, which has created this opportunity to push on. It wasn't planned originally back in March. We were working to a programme. COVID created an opportunity, once construction came back, to not only crack on and deliver this project in a quicker and more holistic manner, but also linking back to the Treasury Minister's budget update yesterday, to drive some real and meaningful activity into the economy. The activity on the prom is significant. It's predominantly local spend. It's driving real income into real people to pay real bills. And we all know that construction is the driver of economic activity. So it really works from that point of view as well. What I would say is that the way the island has coped with COVID and the recovery from it has been quicker than we anticipated when we were putting the plans together. We expected the lockdown situation to last longer than it has, and whilst that's a fantastic position for us to be in, that has created more challenges because people have returned to work. We have got some visitors coming from Guernsey later on today, for example. So that has made it a little bit more difficult. But this is intentional to get the job done. It's not an accident that the Broadway and Summerhill will reopen on the 8th of September. That ties in exactly with children returning to schools. So we're being pragmatic, we're adapting, we're driving forward. And in response to the Minister's for Policy Reform's final point, he's absolutely right, that if we carry on driving everywhere, we will end up with a situation where the only way to mitigate the traffic congestion is to build more roads in our countryside. That's not something that I want to be doing. I'm sure that's not something that many honourable members would see as a positive. So these things all have consequences. We need to make choices. We can't just say we want to address the climate change issue unless we do something about it. We can't say we want to do something about air quality unless we do something about it. So this is all part of a holistic picture, and we need to press on and have some of these tough decisions and tough conversations as a community. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Douglas East, Mrs Barber.
Thank you, Mr President. I'd like to ask the Minister exactly what consultation happened with stakeholders and whether he'd be willing to circulate a list of the stakeholders that were consulted with prior to making the changes to the layout, both at the Governor's Hill and also Governor's Dip and also at the St Ninian's Crossroads. I think that would be helpful for us all to understand a little better as to exactly what happened prior to the decision being made. The other question I've got is around worked examples. So at the minute we're now seeing buses actually backed up in Oncombe Village as well, and I wonder whether I almost want to do a working out in my head of working the numbers in each lane, because what we don't have is the benefit of ever seeing what this was like with the prom closure and without the lanes in the current format. So we're working just on one setup. So I wonder what worked examples were done to actually look at the length of buses, length of cars, the time frames, and then the slip into that second lane. I think, again, that would be very helpful if he doesn't have that with him to circulate that. And then my third point would just be to say, I absolutely agree we need to take the emotion out of it. I've said before in this Honourable Court, we're all on the same page. We all want the right things. We all have different ideas of how we get about them. But I would ask the Minister to listen back to his first answer and consider whether that's what he did. Thank you, Mr President.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. Talk about consultation. Those changes were made to the junction by the department. There wasn't a formal consultation process around should we do it, a 6-week public consultation and then a period of reflection on those consultations. This was fast-moving, action-orientated to get the thing moving in line with an opportunity which had opened up. There's plenty of expertise in the department to look at traffic and the highway network and to assess what we think is going to happen. What we did was put actions into place based on principles, and then we reviewed it. We've changed the Governor's Bridge layout about 3 times. We've made at least 2 changes to the St Ninian's situation with the advanced cycle lane and the extended left turn arrangement. There's no control experiment we can do here. We have to manage this situation and then react to it. I've said that we'll listen and that we'll consider suggestions that are made, provided they're made in an appropriate way. But the final point about buses being backed up in Oncombe, that's nothing to do with the St Ninian's Junction. That's to do with the volume of traffic which has been displaced from the prom. It's got to go somewhere. It's going to go through Oncombe, and it's going to go through Governor's Bridge. St Ninian's Junction is not backed all the way up to Governor's Bridge and then into Oncombe. Thank you, Mr President.
Mrs Lord Brennan.
Thank you, Mr President. I'm just looking for some comfort from the Minister, really, to do with the active travel strategy. Just to hear that he recognises the active travel strategy is a Tynwald strategy, it's government policy. I remain concerned that there is various interpretation of that. So just some comfort in that regard there would be appreciated. And also, will it be possible to bring the integrated transport strategy forward this year? And does the Minister see value in that not only being about bus and heritage rail, or only about public transport? Because I think we need to think bigger. Thank you, Mr.
Honourable
President.
Member, that is getting away from the question put down. I appreciate wider issues have flown from the answers, but Minister, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Mr.
Briefly,
President.
please.
I'll just comment on the active travel strategy. Absolutely recognise it was intentional that the department brought it to Tynwald for approval because we wanted it to be endorsed by this honourable court. We are committed to it. However, it's clear to me, 7 weeks into the job as DOI Minister, that the governance arrangements around active travel are not correct. Those are going to be changed because we have to drive through this. It has to have proper governance around it, and we're going to be doing that, and we're going to be delivering the 2 key routes that are in the plan, and we're going to then reset the plan going forward. Thank you.
Honourable Member Mrs Masker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the Minister agree with me that in carrying out the largest project that's happened in the Isle of Man for many years, in rebuilding the roadways, the substructure and the services on the Douglas promenades, the department is learning but is also open to listening to good ideas such as those that are being suggested in this honourable court today, and especially if it helps ease the pain in the short term, but is also open to learning in the long term if it encourages better practices, better habits that can be noted and taken forward into the future. Thank you, Mr. President.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I absolutely do agree with that. All good organisations learn from experience. That's how you improve performance going forward. In the same ways, we need to learn, and we will learn from the COVID experience, where the public service has rallied around in an amazing way and delivered, frankly, a stunning outcome for the Isle of Man. But we're not finished yet. We have to listen. We have to engage. And we have to make sure that we do these things better in future. But I would point out that this isn't just about the department, this is across the whole of government, and very much welcome the collaborative approach with other departments that are in place in this project, but also across the private sector. I mean, this scheme is being delivered by one of the island's premier building contractors, civil engineering contractors in Oldham Construction. It is being supported by most of the major subcontractors. This is hugely challenging, not just for the department, not just for government, but for the whole of the Isle of Man. You know, we do not do schemes of this scale and complexity very often. We certainly don't do them in the environment of which the Douglas Promenade is, i.e. it is, you know, probably the most difficult and challenging route on the Isle of Man to do something like this in, right in the full glare of publicity, right in front of social media and the traditional media, where every issue is played out in public. You know, every civil engineering project has huge issues. They get dealt with, you get to the end of it, the product's great, and that's what's going to be the case here on the prom. But absolutely, we need to, and we will, take the lessons from it. We'll acknowledge the positives, but equally, we'll look at what can have been done better.
Final supplementary question, Miss Edge.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thought the promenade debate was later on, actually, and that's all we seem to have heard as answers from the Minister. So let's get back to the real questions with regards to the issues with the traffic from Onken. And I hope the President doesn't mind me saying this, but the political shenanigans of introducing a 50% bus. So I'd like the Minister to be completely open and transparent with the people of the Isle of Man, who we're all here to represent, and say that officers did recommend that very early on in the problems with the traffic, even from the promenade. So, Minister, be transparent and open. And I, concur with what Mr. Moulton said about the meeting on the 1st of June. There was many issues raised, but not listened to. The Minister's just said, we're going to listen. Start listening, Minister. I believe the police have also been in contact with the department with regards to the safety issues of the bus lane at St Ninian's. The department's, I'd like the Minister to answer why the department will not consider allowing the lane to be used by other PPP vehicles. Why will he not consider that to try and ease some of the traffic? He ignores emails. I'd also like to, the Minister commented about the mail drop from the My Prom. He used the right word there, My Prom. It wasn't Onken, it wasn't the residents of Laxey or further afield. So I'd also like the Minister, and he won't have the answers today, but I'd like him to circulate the economic impact assessment of the decisions of these road closures, the equality impact assessment for the road closures, and the traffic flow assessments. Thank you, Mr. President.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Not sure I could find many questions there. It seemed to be a shopping list of instructions.
Yes, there were a lot of supplementaries in it, yes. Minister.
Sorry, Mr. President, I didn't quite catch.
Yes, I was agreeing there were a number of supplementary questions contained in that.
Yes. There was also many statements of opinion which the member has the right to articulate, but I'm not going to comment on. The simple economic assessment is the prom is the heartbeat of the Isle of Man. The prom has to be done by the 31st of March to give us a tourist season for next year. There is inconvenience, there is impact, but there are lots of things that are there to mitigate those. There are many schemes that the Department for Enterprise have put in place. There's still the COVID support schemes that are there to support businesses. Whatever the economic cost of the prom scheme, what I can say to you, Mr. President, is that the cost will be far greater if we do not get this done. That's my focus, that's my department's focus, and that's what we're doing.